Sarah Martinez never imagined that serving coffee at an exclusive country club would lead to the most humiliating moment of her life. The wealthy women who frequented the Rosewood Hills Country Club treated her like she was invisible until the day they decided to make her the center of their cruel entertainment. What they didn't know was that Sarah's last name carried more weight than any of their trust funds combined. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine golf course as Sarah adjusted her black uniform and checked her reflection in the employee locker room mirror. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 28, she had been working at the Rosewood Hills Country Club for almost 2 years, serving drinks and appetizers to women who spent more on a single handbag than Sarah made in 3 months. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid her bills while she figured out what she really wanted to do with her life. Sarah had always been different from her family. While they thrived in boardrooms and high-stakes business deals, she found fulfillment in simple human connections. The smile of a regular customer, the thank you from someone having a difficult day, these small moments meant more to her than any corporate achievement ever could. Her family didn't understand her choices, especially her older brother who had built a tech empire from nothing and couldn't comprehend why she chose service work over joining his company. The Rosewood Hills Country Club attracted a very specific type of clientele. These were women who had married into wealth, inherited fortunes, or built successful businesses themselves. They spoke in perfectly modulated voices about charity galas, art auctions, and European vacations. Their jewelry sparkled even in dim lighting, and their clothing bore designer labels that most people only saw in magazines. Sarah served them their morning lattes and afternoon cocktails with professional courtesy, always maintaining the invisible barrier that separated staff from members. Among the regular patrons was Victoria Ashworth, a woman in her early 50s who seemed to command respect from everyone around her. Victoria had inherited a chain of luxury hotels and expanded the business internationally. She held court at her usual table every Tuesday morning, surrounded by her circle of equally affluent friends. There was Margaret Chen, whose husband owned half the commercial real estate downtown, and Diana Rodriguez, who had built a successful cosmetics company before selling it for hundreds of millions. These women never acknowledged Sarah beyond placing their order. To them, she was simply part of the furniture, a necessary but unremarkable fixture in their carefully curated world. Sarah didn't mind the anonymity. She had grown up around wealth and understood how it could make people feel entitled to treat others as beneath them. What bothered her wasn't their indifference, but their casual cruelty toward other staff members and their assumption that money gave them the right to judge everyone else's worth. On this particular Tuesday morning, the usual group was discussing their children's accomplishments with competitive enthusiasm. Victoria bragged about her daughter's acceptance to an exclusive European business school. Margaret shared news of her son's promotion at his law firm. Diana announced her youngest daughter's engagement to a senator's son. The conversation flowed from private schools to luxury vacations to investment opportunities, each woman trying to outdo the others with stories of success and privilege. Sarah moved quietly between tables, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates. She had perfected the art of being present but unnoticed, efficient but invisible. The skill had served her well in this environment where being too friendly or too familiar could cost her the job. As she approached Victoria's table with a fresh pot of coffee, she couldn't help but overhear their conversation shifting toward gossip about people they knew. "Did you hear about the Henderson girl?" Victoria was saying, her voice carrying that particular tone wealthy women used when discussing someone's misfortune. "After all that expensive education, she's working as a teacher in some public school. Can you imagine? Her parents must be mortified." Margaret shook her head sympathetically. "It's such a waste, all those opportunities, and she chooses to work with other people's children for practically nothing. I don't understand what goes through these young people's minds." Diana leaned forward conspiratorially. "Speaking of wasted potential, my cousin's daughter just told her family she wants to be a social worker." "A social worker?" After graduating from Princeton, her parents are beside themselves. The women laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Sarah kept her expression neutral as she refilled their cups, but something cold settled in her stomach. These women were talking about careers dedicated to helping others as if they were personal failures, as if the only measure of success was the size of one's bank account. "It's this generation," Victoria continued, gesturing with her manicured hand. "They have no ambition, no understanding of what real success looks like. They think they can change the world with good intentions instead of hard work and smart investment." Sarah finished serving their table and moved away, but she could still hear their conversation. The topic had shifted to judging various service workers they encountered in their daily life. They criticized their hairdresser's business sense, mocked their personal trainer's side business, and laughed about a restaurant server who had mentioned studying for her nursing degree. As the morning progressed, more women joined Victoria's group. The table grew louder and more animated as they shared stories and opinions. Sarah noticed that their conversation kept returning to the theme of people who in their view lacked proper ambition or had made poor life choices. They seemed to take particular pleasure in discussing anyone who worked in service industries, as if these jobs were evidence of personal failure rather than honest work. Around 11 o'clock, the conversation took a more personal turn. Victoria had apparently noticed Sarah moving between tables and decided to make her the subject of their discussion. Sarah was in the kitchen when she heard her name mentioned, and she paused by the doorway to listen. That server, the Martinez girl, Victoria was saying. She's been here for what, 2 years now? Still just serving coffee and clearing tables. No progression, no ambition to move up or move on. It's exactly what I was talking about. Margaret nodded knowingly. I've noticed her too. Pleasant enough, I suppose, but clearly lacks any real drive. Some people are just meant for service positions. They don't have the intelligence or ambition for anything more challenging. Diana added her perspective with a dismissive wave. It's actually rather sad. She seems like a nice girl, but she's obviously content with mediocrity. No vision for her future, no desire to improve her circumstances. She'll probably be serving coffee here for the next 20 years. Sarah felt her cheeks burn as she listened to these women dissect her life and character based on nothing more than seeing her at work. They had never spoken to her beyond ordering drinks, never asked about her background or aspirations, never considered that she might have reasons for her choices that went beyond their narrow understanding of success. The conversation continued with Victoria explaining her theory about people who worked in service industries. According to her, these individuals lacked the education, intelligence, or ambition to pursue more prestigious careers. They were, in her view, fundamentally different from successful people like herself and her friends. The other women agreed enthusiastically, each adding their own observations about the limitations of working-class people. The thing is, Victoria concluded, these people simply don't understand what real success requires. They think showing up and doing basic tasks is enough. They have no concept of strategic thinking, business acumen, or long-term planning. It's why they stay in these positions their entire life. Sarah realized that the women weren't just talking about her anymore. They were expressing their fundamental beliefs about class, worth, and human potential. In their worldview, anyone who worked in service was there because they lacked the capacity for anything better. The idea that someone might choose such work for personal reasons, or that it might be temporary, or that it required skills they couldn't appreciate simply didn't occur to them. As the lunch crowd began to arrive, Sarah threw herself into her work. She took orders with a smile, served meals efficiently, and cleared tables thoroughly. But Victoria's words echoed in her mind. The casual cruelty of being discussed like an object, the assumptions about her intelligence and ambitions, the complete dismissal of her value as a person, it all stung more than she wanted to admit. The afternoon shift brought new challenges as the club prepared for a special networking event. Local businesswomen were hosting a mixer for female entrepreneurs, and the main dining room buzzed with activity as staff arranged tables and prepared appetizers. Sarah found herself assigned to serve the VIP section where Victoria and her friends had reserved premium seats. As the event began, successful women from various industries mingled and shared stories of their business achievements. Sarah moved through the crowd with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne, invisible among the power suits and confident conversation. She listened to discussions about market expansion, investment strategies, and acquisition deals. These women spoke a language of success that she understood better than they could imagine, but in her server's uniform, she might as well have been from another planet. Victoria's voice rose above the general chatter as she held court with a new group of women who had joined her table. The networking event had given her a fresh audience for her opinions about work ethic and social hierarchy. Sarah couldn't help but notice that the topic of conversation had returned to judging people in service positions. You can always tell, Victoria was explaining to her new listeners, the ones who are going somewhere and the ones who will stay exactly where they are forever. It's about mindset, about having vision and drive. Some people are just naturally limited in their thinking. One of the newer arrivals, a woman Sarah didn't recognize, seemed uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I think there are many reasons why people choose different career paths. Sometimes the most interesting people are the ones you least expect. Victoria laughed dismissively. Oh, you're too generous. Trust me, after years of observing these people, you learn to read them quick. Take our server here, for instance. Sarah's heart sank as she realized Victoria was about to use her as an example again. Sweet girl, works hard enough, but you can tell she has no real ambition beyond collecting her paycheck. No spark of entrepreneurial spirit, no indication that she's ever had an original business idea in her life. The conversation was attracting attention from nearby tables. Sarah could feel eyes on her as she continued serving, her professional smile becoming harder to maintain. She wanted to disappear, to find some excuse to leave the room, but her supervisor was watching, and the event was in full swing. Margaret joined the discussion with enthusiasm. Victoria's absolutely right. You develop an eye for these things. It's not cruel to be honest about people's limitations. Some individuals are simply meant to be followers, not leaders. They're happier when someone else makes the decisions, and they just execute simple tasks. Diana nodded in agreement. Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that, really. Society needs people who are content with basic jobs. Not everyone can be a CEO or business owner. The world needs servers and cleaners and cashiers. These people serve their purpose. Sarah felt something shift inside her as she listened to these women reduce her and millions of others to their narrow definitions of worth and potential. The casual dehumanization, the complete lack of curiosity about who she really was, the assumption that her current job defined her entire capacity as a human being. It was breathtaking in its arrogance. As the evening wore on, Victoria's commentary became bolder and more public. She had found her rhythm with this topic and seemed to be enjoying her role as an expert on human potential and social hierarchy. Other guests began to gather around her table, drawn by her confident pronouncements about success and failure. The fundamental problem, Victoria declared, her voice carrying across the room, is that too many people today have unrealistic expectations about their capabilities. They've been told that everyone is special, that anyone can achieve anything, but the reality is that most people have very limited potential. You can see it in how they approach their work, how they think about their future, how they present themselves to the world. Sarah realized that the moment had come when she could no longer remain invisible. Victoria was now pointing directly at her as she spoke, using her as a living example of her theories about class and potential. The entire room was looking at Sarah, some with curiosity, others with the uncomfortable fascination people feel when witnessing someone else's humiliation. This young woman has been serving here for years, Victoria continued, her voice growing louder and more confident. And I guarantee you she has never once thought about starting her own business, never considered what it would take to become an entrepreneur, never even imagined herself in a leadership position. It's simply not in her nature. Some people are born to serve, and others are born to lead. The room had grown quiet now, with all attention focused on Victoria and her impromptu lecture. Sarah stood frozen with a tray in her hands, feeling the weight of dozens of stares. She could see phones being discreetly pulled out, could sense that this moment was being captured and would likely be shared beyond this room. Victoria stood up now, emboldened by her audience and the attention she was receiving. I think it would be educational, she announced, to demonstrate the difference between someone with real business acumen and someone who simply executes other people's decisions. Sarah dear, why don't you tell us about your biggest business idea, your most innovative thought about entrepreneurship? Surely someone who has been in the workforce for years must have some insights about running a business. The challenge hung in the air like a weapon. Sarah could feel the cruel anticipation of the crowd, the expectation of her failure, the setup for her public embarrassment. Victoria was asking her to prove her worth according to standards that had been designed to exclude people like her, using criteria that ignored everything about who she really was and where she came from. But as Sarah stood there, holding her tray and feeling the weight of their judgment, something began to stir inside her. 28 years of hiding who she really was, of choosing anonymity over recognition, of protecting herself by being invisible, all of it suddenly felt like a betrayal of not just herself, but of everyone Victoria had dismissed and diminished with her casual cruelty. Sarah looked directly at Victoria, her posture straightening with quiet confidence. You want to know about business innovation? She said, her voice clear and steady. Let me tell you about a platform that revolutionized how small businesses connect with customers worldwide. The room fell silent. Victoria's smug expression faltered slightly, but she maintained her condescending smile. Oh, this should be interesting, she said with theatrical amusement. Sarah set down her tray and walked to the center of the room. 3 years ago, a tech company launched an application that allows local service providers to reach customers directly, eliminating traditional advertising costs and geographical limitations.
The platform uses artificial intelligence to match customer needs with service providers based on location, availability, and specialized skills. Victoria exchanged glances with her friends, clearly not expecting this level of detail.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Well, anyone can read about technology companies online, she said dismissively. But understanding how to actually build and scale a business is entirely different. You're absolutely right, Sarah replied calmly. Building requires understanding market gaps, user experience design, and sustainable revenue models. This particular platform identified that 67% of small business owners struggled with customer acquisition costs. The solution involved creating a commission-based system where providers only pay when they successfully complete jobs. Margaret leaned forward, her curiosity overriding her skepticism. That actually sounds like a legitimate business model. Sarah nodded. The initial challenge was building trust between strangers conducting business online. The platform implemented a dual rating system, secure payment processing, and comprehensive background checks. Within 18 months it processed over $50 million in transactions across 43 countries. Diana raised an eyebrow. Those are very specific numbers for someone who supposedly just serves coffee. The company went public 2 years ago, Sarah continued, her confidence growing. Initial public offering raised $800 million. Current market capitalization exceeds $12 billion. The platform now facilitates everything from home repairs to freelance graphic design, creating economic opportunities for millions of independent workers. Victoria's face had gone pale. She was clearly struggling to reconcile this detailed business knowledge with her assumptions about Sarah's capabilities. Anyone can memorize statistics, she said weakly, but creating something from nothing requires vision, connections, and capital that people in your position simply don't have access to. Sarah smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't the practiced professional smile of a server. You're talking about Connect Local, aren't you? Called out a woman from the back of the room. I use that app constantly for home services. It's brilliant. My daughter's interior design business took off because of that platform, added another guest. She went from struggling freelancer to six-figure income in 2 years. Victoria looked around the room, sensing that control was slipping away from her. Well, yes, it's a useful service, but we're talking about Sarah here, not some tech entrepreneur. Actually, Sarah said quietly, we're talking about the same person. The words hung in the air like an electric charge. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The entire room seemed to lean forward collectively, sensing that something significant was about to be revealed. My name is Sarah Martinez Chen, she continued, using her full name for the first time in this setting. My brother David Chen founded Connect Local. I helped develop the original business model during family dinners, when he was struggling to scale his previous startup. The dual rating system was my idea, born from my experience working in service industries, and understanding what both customers and providers actually need. Victoria's face went from pale to red. That's impossible, she stammered. The Chen family are tech royalty. They don't work as servers. I chose to work here, Sarah said simply. After David's company went public, I wanted to understand business from the ground up. I wanted to see how real people interact with services, what frustrates them, what makes them loyal customers. You can't learn that from boardroom presentations or market research reports. Margaret was staring at Sarah with a mixture of shock and recognition. David Chen is your brother. The David Chen who was featured on the cover of Fortune magazine. The same David Chen who just acquired 3 European startups last month, added Diana, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded. He's been asking me to join Connect Local officially for over a year. I've been consulting informally, helping design features based on real user experience. But I wanted to complete my research first, to understand every aspect of the service ecosystem we're trying to improve. The room buzzed with whispers and the subtle sound of phones being pulled out as people searched for information about the Chen family. Sarah could see recognition dawning on faces throughout the crowd as they connected her to news articles and business profiles they'd read. Victoria was now visibly shaking, Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "I had no idea," she managed to say. "If I had known who you were, you would have treated me differently," Sarah finished. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't treat me poorly because of who I am. You treated me poorly because of who you thought I was. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my worth." A woman near the front of the room stood up. "I remember reading about Connect Local's upcoming expansion into luxury services. They're specifically targeting high-end markets like country clubs and exclusive residential communities." Sarah nodded. "That's the project I've been researching. We're launching Connect Local Premium next quarter, focusing on affluent customers who value quality and reliability above cost savings. My time here has been invaluable for understanding this market segment." Victoria's face went from red to ashen as the implication sank in. "You've been studying us," she said in horror. "Observing how we treat service providers, how we make decisions about vendors." "Among other things," Sarah confirmed, "we've identified significant gaps between what wealthy customers say they want and how they actually behave. Most market research relies on surveys and focus groups, but people don't always tell the truth about their biases and preferences. Direct observation provides much more accurate data." Diana leaned back in her chair, looking. "So all this time while we've been talking about business and making deals, you've been conducting market research on us." "Not just on you," Sarah clarified. "On the entire ecosystem. How staff members really feel about their work environments, what motivates exceptional service, how class dynamics affect business relationships. It's been fascinating research." Margaret spoke up, her voice tentative. "What kind of conclusions have you reached?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "That most wealthy customers underestimate the intelligence and capabilities of service providers. That creates inefficiencies in communication and missed opportunities for innovation. Companies that recognize and leverage the insights of frontline workers consistently outperform those that don't." "So you're saying we've been stupid?" Victoria said bitterly. "I'm saying you've been limited by your assumptions," Sarah replied. "Just like you assumed things about me based on my job title. Many businesses assume things about their customers, their employees, and their markets. Those assumptions cost money and opportunities." The room remained silent as people processed this information. Sarah could see phones being held discreetly as people recorded or live-streamed portions of the conversation. She realized that this moment would likely be shared far beyond this room, just as Victoria's earlier humiliation had been intended to be. A woman Sarah didn't recognize stood up. "I own a chain of high-end restaurants. We've been struggling with staff retention and customer satisfaction. Would Connect Local be interested in consulting on service optimization?" Before Sarah could answer, another voice called out, "My company has been looking for better ways to connect with affluent customers. Can we discuss partnership opportunities?" Sarah found herself at the center of a networking frenzy as business owners who had minutes earlier watched her being humiliated now competed for her attention. The transformation was startling and swift, but not entirely surprising. She had seen how quickly attitudes could change when people realized someone had value they wanted to access. Victoria remained seated, looking increasingly isolated as the crowd shifted their focus to Sarah. The woman who had commanded the room just minutes earlier now seemed small and forgotten. Her friends had moved away, drawn by the excitement surrounding Sarah's revelation. "Ladies," Sarah said, raising her voice to address the room, "I appreciate your interest, but I think we should address what just happened here. Victoria made assumptions about my capabilities based on my job. Most of you agreed with her assessment. Now that you know my background, suddenly I'm someone worth talking to. What does that say about how we value people?" The room grew uncomfortable as Sarah's words hit their mark. People shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact, suddenly aware of their own complicity in the earlier judgment. "The woman serving your coffee yesterday has the same intelligence she has today," Sarah continued. "The person cleaning your office has the same potential for insight and innovation they had before you learned their background. Worth isn't determined by job titles or family connection." Victoria finally found her voice again. "I apologize," she said quietly. "I was wrong to make those assumptions about you, about anyone." Sarah looked at her with something approaching sympathy.
I don't think you're a bad person, Victoria, but I think you've been so surrounded by wealth and privilege that you've forgotten that intelligence and worth exist at every economic level. That's not just morally problematic, it's bad business. What do you mean, Victoria? Connect Local's success comes from recognizing that expertise exists everywhere, Sarah explained. The handyman who fixes your plumbing might have insights about materials and efficiency that could revolutionize construction. The woman who cleans offices might understand workflow optimization better than management consultants. When you dismiss people based on their current circumstances, you miss enormous opportunities. Diana spoke up hesitantly. So you're saying we should treat everyone like they might be secret millionaires? Sarah shook her head. I'm saying you should treat everyone like they're human beings with valuable perspective. Not because they might be wealthy, but because respect and curiosity lead to better outcomes for everyone. The conversation continued for another hour as Sarah fielded questions about business strategy, market research, and social dynamics. She noticed that people were genuinely interested in her insights now, asking thoughtful questions about innovation and customer experience. As the evening wound down, Victoria approached Sarah privately. I want to apologize again, more personally this time. I was cruel, and there's no excuse for that regardless of who you are or what your background is. Sarah studied her for a moment. I accept your apology, but I hope you'll think about this experience when you interact with other service workers. They deserve your respect whether they're connected to billionaires or not. Victoria nodded, looking genuinely chastened. Would you consider giving a presentation to our women's business group about recognizing potential and avoiding assumptions? I think we could all benefit from your perspective. I'll think about it, Sarah said. But first I need to call my brother and tell him I'm ready to join Connect Local officially. Turns out I've learned everything I needed to know about this market segment. As Sarah walked toward the employee exit for the last time, she reflected on the evening's events. The humiliation had been painful, but it had also been clarifying. She had spent 2 years hiding her background, trying to understand the world from a different perspective. What she had learned was that assumptions and prejudices were costly for everyone involved. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Saw the video online. Ready to come home and change the world with me. Sarah smiled as she typed back, more ready than ever. We have work to do. The next morning, news of Sarah Martinez Chen's identity spread through social media and business networks. The video of Victoria's humiliation and Sarah's response went viral, sparking conversations about class assumptions and hidden potential. Connect Local's stock price jumped 15% as investors recognized the marketing value of the story. But for Sarah, the real victory wasn't in the publicity or the stock price. It was in the messages she received from service workers who felt seen and validated, from business owners reconsidering their hiring practices, and from young people who realized that success could be defined in many different ways. She had learned that hiding your truth doesn't protect you from judgment. People will make assumptions regardless. The only choice is whether those assumptions define you or whether you define yourself. And she had finally chosen to define herself on her own terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them